Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, saving thousands of dollars on a music video by using non-union scabs, or else a scrappy upstart, saving thousands on a music video by using the AI generator Runway. This is your show, because ultimately it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the last Friday of April 2023, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Chet who drove a Hyundai Veloster. Is that how you pronounce that? And it had like Futurama bobbleheads on the dashboard. And old Chet was always trying to sell you stolen vouchers to online gambling sites. And he'd also charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in: hosting and a custom domain name, and dozens of fully customizable design templates. This year, Bandzoogle would like to congratulate its members on surpassing $100 million in commission-free sales through their websites. The Working Songwriter Podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, you can check out my tour page, joepugmusic.com/tour, where there are a bevy of new tour dates posted all around the world, from Pittsburgh to Pioneer Town, California. I guess they're all around the country right now. Nothing outside of the country, but soon enough on that front. Finally, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you can become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription. A subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to everybody who's taken the time and the capital to support the show in that way. We very much appreciate it. If you're not in a place to support the show in that way, I get it. It's totally fine. You could still help us out in a couple of ways that are free. First, you could leave us a rating in the iTunes store, or second, you could simply tell a friend about the show. Text a link to the show to a friend of yours who you think might dig it. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. It was a pleasure to talk to Dallas for this episode, and I hope you dig it. Our guest this week hails from Ontario and performs under the project name City and Color. Dallas Green began his musical journey as part of the post-hardcore band Alexisonfire. After releasing his first album in 2005, it went platinum by the very next year. He's recorded for Dine Alone, Vagrant, and Cooking Vinyl Records. He's been nominated for 10 prestigious Juno Awards and has won 3. He's toured with Alice in Chains, Pink, Ben Harper, Bahamas, and many others. American Songwriter says that throughout his 20-year career, he's always crafted songs openly and vulnerably, laying bare his soul in order to write his way through difficult times. The Indie Times described his latest album as all-encompassing and engrossing. I got a chance to catch up with him on the phone a few weeks ago and hear about his musical journey so far. Dallas Green of City in Color, thank you so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. You grew up, man, in Ontario, and you were like the perfect age, born in 1980 for the alternative explosion in like the early 1990s. I can hear some of that in your music, but I would have to imagine that was some of the stuff seeping through to you at that point in your life. Is that on point?
That's completely on point. Like I started playing guitar when I was pretty young, like eight or nine. My parents got me lessons, and I don't even know if I had like an interest in it. It was more them just like trying to give my sister and I some opportunities that they didn't have when they were younger, right? Like, let's get them into some things and see if anything sticks. But that sort of coincided with a few years later, grunge happened, and that was it for me, So Alice in Chains' Dirt came out on my 12th birthday, and it was like the first CD I got with my own money. My mom took me to the mall, and I went and saw Pearl Jam and Soundgarden open for Neil Young when I was like 13 with my friend and his dad. And like those moments as like a real impressionable 12, 13-year-old kind of guitar player, that was all I needed. And then that mixed with, Canada had this beautiful alternative scene of its own that was sort of like stranded up in Canada, because that was obviously pre-internet, where the borderline, the invisible borderline, really stunted a lot of Canadian bands. But I think their contribution, like bands like Sloan and Thrush Hermit and a lot of the stuff from Halifax, like the East Coast alternative scene, was really important to me. And I think, from that is when I started writing songs. So it was just inevitable that it would seep in, and I'd like kind of start to try to emulate those things while I was kind of trying to develop my own voice.
It's interesting. It sounds like your folks themselves, they didn't grow up with creative opportunities or a creative background, but that was something that they wanted for you. Why do you think that was?
Well, both my parents and my older sister are giant music lovers. Mm-hmm. They just weren't inclined, And I think that was part of it, was they just loved listening to records and things. And so they thought, let's just see if Dal will take to the guitar. I think it's the sort of same thing as like a lot of kids just go into piano lessons when they're young or something, just something to do after school kind of thing. But I had no idea how much it would sink its teeth into me, but it was that taking Pearl Jam cassettes to my guitar teacher, Randy, and realizing like the theory was never good. Like I was never good with it, like sort of as extended into like I can't do anything technical.
Sure.
But as soon as Randy wrote down the tablature of a Pearl Jam song, and then like kind of taught me how you could listen and develop your ear to like play along to your favorite records, I mean, that was just it, So, but that's what Mom and Dad kind of gave to me, and then they supported it as well, right? My dad would scrape together some money, and he bought me my first like electric guitar and a little tiny amp at like a Midnight Madness sale at the music store in town. And they like knocked down a wall in the basement to make room for me and my cousin to like set up a jam space when I was 15. And, so they were always really supportive of just me wanting to, because I was creative right away. I was trying to write songs when I was in high school, and they could tell that I wasn't just like, it wasn't just a hobby. It was something I was deeply like becoming emotionally entrenched in.
That's like the dream as a parent. Kids are so uninterested in so many things that when they finally latch on to something, you're like, please God, I'll move heaven and earth to make sure that you can continue to be interested in this.
Yeah, exactly.
So why do you think it was? A lot of people who get into guitar or start to fall in love with it, well, one of the things that they'll do is they'll just cover songs or they'll do something like that. It sounds like you went straight to the composition phase, which is not necessarily a common thing for something at that age. Why do you think you went straight there?
I think I was just being really moved by music. Like if I think back, like, as much as I was listening to Alice in Chains as a 13-year-old and, listening to Jerry and Lane sing about heroin addiction, I didn't hear that. I just heard people speaking to me, and I would feel it very deeply. I know, like, when I would hear a song, it would, like, just, make me do the face. And then I heard Jeff Buckley sing, when I think I was 14, Grace came out, and I heard that, and it made me feel so overwhelmed just by listening to his voice and his words that I think those were the kind of moments where I thought, like, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to write something that makes someone feel the way I feel, or at least, similar to that, like just that emotional response. And I guess I was just always pretty open with my emotions, and I was interested in writing them down, and putting them to music. So I think, I probably wrote my first song when I was 15 years old, and had a band by the time I was 16, and we were writing lots of, like, instrumental songs and stuff like that. But then I was my first real band just at the end of high school. We made 2 EPs and we're playing around town, and I joined Alexis on Fire when I was 21 years old, and we made, so it was like, it was there right away. And I think it was just because I felt such a connection to the process of writing your own music and your own song,
Well, and also it sounds like sort of an ownership. I mean, was that Helican Blue, the band? Okay. So like sort of an ownership at that age, to be that young, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, and to be able to move forward with a project like, okay, we're going to record an EP. Okay, it went well. Now we're going to record another one. Well, we're going to go to a little club in town and we're going to play the songs from that EP, and maybe 15 people will come out. I mean, the sense of ownership, someone that age, what else can you own at that age? You don't have any fucking money,
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think when I was the thing too, when I was in high school, nothing was grabbing me, and I think there was a time where, I didn't do really well in school. And I think there was a period there where, especially because in the school I went to, music was not being fostered whatsoever. I did feel a little sort of like, I don't want to say dumb, but there was part of me that felt like I wasn't really good at anything, because I wasn't, like, getting good grades, and I wasn't interested in paying attention a lot. And I was also a skateboarder, so I was really just thinking about skateboarding and playing my guitar, Yeah. But I think when I would try to explain to people that, like, I really want to try to do this music thing, like, I'm not just being a slacker or whatever, I think it was because I felt like it was the thing I could own, and the thing I could be good at, And then that sort of just led to wanting to, like, make the music.
Well, it sounds like not only make the music, but make the project work. Do you think that lit a fire under you to a certain degree to think, like, well, people don't think I can do the school thing, and so they also think that me wanting to do music is kind of a joke. Well, I'm going to show them it's not a joke. Like, I can build this thing. I'm going to make it I guess this is a bad word for it, but for lack of a better word, like a legitimate enterprise that I'm putting together. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, I obviously understood that, like, there was a lot. I'm from St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Like, it's not necessarily like a hotbed for developing musicians. Neil Peart from Rush is from there, and there's a couple other songwriters from around that area. But there wasn't, like, it's not like I thought, oh, I'm going to write all these songs and I'm going to become, like, a rock star. But I did just I wanted to be a songwriter, I wanted to be in a band. I wanted to see what it could be like to spend a life making music, and I think a lot of that had to do with, like, I was pretty driven to that. So anytime like I would have a teacher that was kind of like, you need to pay attention more in science class or whatever, I'd be like, I don't give a fuck about science, pardon my language, you know? But
Yeah.
I had a couple really, really great teachers in high school that kind of like, I don't want to say that they saw it, but they knew that I wasn't fooling around and that I was trying to be deeply invested in something, you know? And
That's good. You need a couple people to see it. You don't need everybody to see it, but you do need a couple people to see it. And that's interesting. It sounds like, so I'd never heard of any of those bands from that Halifax scene that you were talking about, but that's interesting to me that you had that because, like you said, you didn't feel like necessarily you'd be a rock star or something like that. So you needed an example of something else that you could become. And when there's a self-contained scene like that close to you, you say, well, maybe I could do something like that.
Well, see, the thing, Joe, was great was that because of where we were geographically, like St. Catharines is an hour from Toronto, but also an hour from Buffalo. And so a lot of the Canadian touring bands would, when all you could do was tour Canada, a lot of bands that I was watching on Much Music would stop and play in St. Catharines. So I'd get to go see them on the weekends or whatever. And I was going to shows from a very young age because thankfully there was a lot of bands coming through and playing. And that was something too for me. Whenever I saw a band from Canada come through St. Catharines on tour, that was just another sign to me that I might be able to do it myself, you know? And so, have you ever heard the songwriter Joel Plaskett?
I've heard the name, but I don't know.
From Canada? Okay, well, he's incredible. You should listen to him. But Joel's first band was this band called Thrush Hermit from Halifax.
Okay.
And they were like, kind of like a 90s alternative, sort of brashy pop punk band. And like seeing them play when I was 13, like it just kind of like there was always these like signifiers that would happen as the years go by that I would just feel like it was a possibility that if I just put the work in and worked on the songs, like I think too, because my first band Helicon, people started coming to see us in our hometown, right? And it was like I started to feel like people were picking up what I was putting down.
Yes.
And that's kind of how I've just continued to do it.
Yeah. Straight line all the way through.
Yeah.
So you would go from there, that first band, as you mentioned earlier, your first kind of, your emergence onto like a larger stage in Canada and in the world was with Alexis on Fire. My understanding is you were more of like a member of that band, maybe not necessarily like the leading force in that. Is that the case? Like what was your role and how did that all come together with Alexis on Fire?
Yeah, we sort of like all of us were in other bands in this little scene in our hometown, right? And like my band was playing with Wade and Chris's band, who are the bass player and guitar player in Alexis, and George, who's our sort of lead vocalist, he was playing bass in another band, and our original drummer was in this other band. And so Wade, being a real resourceful 17-year-old kid, kind of like saw everybody and was like, I think we should start another band with like people from other bands. And we had one jam and it was this real, like, what do we want to sound like? And Wade's whole sort of, I guess his idea was everybody do everything.
Okay.
What
does that mean?
Like I'm a singer, Wade's a singer, he wanted George to scream because we kind of wanted to play this like hard post-punk screamo, whatever you want to call it, just like influenced by like aggressive music. But we sort of had this like, let's do everything all at once approach. We've got 3 singers, we're all going to sing, maybe at the same time, maybe here and there, like play as much guitar as we can, just make it this sort of real cacophonous kind of mental music. And I don't think we had any idea of what it would sound like or what it would become, but then that same kind of thing happened. We got together, we played our first show, and all of our friends came because they knew us from all of our other bands. And I think after the first show, everybody was just sort of like, what the hell was that? And that just kind of kept going. And so we developed this thing with Alexis where it was 5 people writing songs. It was like, I'll bring a guitar idea and maybe a vocal melody. And then Wade will come and bring his, and George will think about what he wants to sing about. and Steele, our bass player's got this really crazy brain. So he would always like inject these weird rhythms or weird time signatures he thought we should try in. And it really just became this, like a group, you know, and with no real lead singer, no real lead guitarist, no real, just something kind of born out of the punk scene. But yeah, so I was a singer and a songwriter in it, but it was never like, I would never just write a song fully and bring it to the band and go, here's the song, let's play it like this.
And so as a writer, what did you start learning, and like what did you take away from that? You start out in high school very young, kind of autodidactically teaching yourself, sounds like on your own. And now you're in this collective where maybe there isn't anyone in that group either who's formally trained in any way, but you guys must be learning from one another, stealing things from one another.
Absolutely.
You know, so what are some of those skills that you're picking up at that time?
Well, for me, the thing that I sort of learned right away that I was good at was I already figured out how to write songs. I had written many songs front to back from my old band, and even there was a bunch of songs I had already been working on that I kind of thought could be solo songs, you know, and I'd made demos and all that. But then when I joined Alexis, I realized that I could also collaborate, you know, which I think is something completely different. Like I think you understand, like, you know, when you write a song and you know exactly how it should go.
Yeah.
There's that, which I think is a beautiful thing. But going into a room with 4 other people and like starting from scratch or starting with just one basic idea and sort of letting it evolve till the point where all 5 of you are happy. And, you know, sometimes that means conceding some of your input, or your idea gets shot down because someone else comes up with something that works better for the song. And, you know, as a young kid, you kind of got to learn how to take all of that and not let it like deter you from bringing up another idea the next time. So I think that was really important. And as far as like other things I learned, the first Alexis record is just, it's absolute chaos. And I think I learned that I was able to exist in a format like that as well, aside from just being the singer-songwriter of a band, you know? Mm-hmm.
Well, and also when you have something that is self-described there as chaos, to me, when you have a piece of art like that, it's a nice reminder, because a lot of people would find that record, right, and fall in love with it. It's a nice reminder that listeners are able to do a fair amount of work on their own, decoding and listening and finding meaning in a work of art. And not only do they not need their hand held all the time, sometimes the worst thing you can do is hold their hand through a piece like that. And they want to experience it in that kind of chaotic way.
Yeah, and I think that like sometimes people forget that like everyone listens to it differently. Mm-hmm. Everyone hears a song however they're going to hear it and ingest it however they're going to ingest it, right? And I think the way I've always approached writing is I'm going to write the song the way that I hear it and sort of with me in mind, and then hope that the listener can not only take what they need from it, but that it's there for them to find what they need in it.
Are you stuck in a rut? Are you tired of listening to that Jimmy Buffett 20th Century Masters CD over and over again and need some new music? Are you sick of making hamburger helper beef stroganoff for dinner every night and you want something new to cook? What you are looking for, my friends, is the Enthusiast Digest. That's my monthly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox the first Sunday morning of every month, bursting with musical recommendations, poetry selections, recipes and cooking techniques for my favorite dishes, and items of general interest culled from the vast cesspool that is the internet. The Enthusiast Digest is free to subscribe to. If you dig the poetry that you hear on this show and the artists that you're hearing from, you'll dig the newsletter because I approach it with the exact same sensibility of curation. Go to joepugmusic.com/newsletter today to sign up for free. That is joepugmusic.com/newsletter. It takes approximately 15 seconds to sign up for a free newsletter that will enrich the first Sunday of your month with a veritable cornucopia of new and delightful recommendations. That's the Enthusiast Digest, the first Sunday of every month. Sign up for free at joepugmusic.com/newsletter. Dallas seems to have walked the tightrope of fame and public acclaim quite successfully. When your music is as popular as his has been for the last 20 years, it can be easy to fall into yourself and to lose your way to excesses. He seems to have stayed grounded, and there's a wonderful poem by Samuel Hazo about the wisdom of that route. It's entitled, "The Necessary Brevity of Pleasures." Prolonged, they slacken into pain or sadness, in accordance with the law of apples. One apple satisfies, 2 apples cloy, 3 apples glut. Call it a tug of war between enough and more than enough, between the stay-at-homers and globe-trotting see-the-worlders. Like lovers seeking heaven in excess, the hopelessly insatiable forget how passion sharpens appetites that gross indulgence numbs. Result? The haves have not what all the have-nots have, since much of having is the need to have. Even my dog knows that, and more than that. He slumbers in a moon of sunlight, scratches his twitches and itches in measure, savors every bite of grub with equal gratitude, and stays determinedly in place unless what suddenly exciting happens. Viewing mere change as threatening, he relishes a few undoubtable and proven pleasures to enjoy each day in sequence and with canine moderation. They're there for him in waiting, and he never wears them out. So what was it like? What did you start to learn on the business end? I mean, that group would put out, 4 records together. I think you guys did some significant touring together as well. So what were you starting to learn as a young man in that way about the business end and about the touring business?
Well, I think I'm lucky because I did learn a whole lot from a very young age. We signed a publishing deal, oddly enough, with Alexa on Fire. Like we met this guy named Michael McCarty, who was still a friend. He ran EMI Music Publishing Canada, and he came to see us play in St. Catharines. And at this time, he was like a pretty big deal in the Canadian music industry. And a guy who worked in their office as their like engineer, they had a little writing room in their office in Toronto. He was like really into heavy music, and he came and saw us and then told Mike to come see us. And we came up with this way where Greg would start a label, and we would use the sort of money that we got from the publishing deal to make this our first Alexis record. And we signed with Greg, this guy, for a 3-record deal. Now at this point too, like, you have to understand the type of music we were making and the record we were making. There was really no plan for success, because it just wasn't the type of music that, it was coming from basements and Legion halls. It was not on the TV or on the radio whatsoever, in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was we made this first record, and we made a music video. We got like a grant from the Canadian government to make a music video. And it got on Much Music. And then that was the thing that really it opened the door for us. It was like somebody played it on Much Music, and then people started calling in requesting it. And then it got to this point where there was like a fan voted, sort of like a TRL type show.
Yeah.
And our video one night ended up the #1 video, and it was like it beat like a Britney Spears video, and it beat all these pop things from the early 2000s, and like all of Canada just went. It was like Canada, a bunch of kids in Canada saw the video and were like, "That's what we like. We don't like any of this other shit that you're playing," you know?
That you're force feeding us. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was really the thing that like gave us a little bit of exposure and allowed us to kind of, okay, well, let's get out there and start touring, because we were already playing all over the place. Like we would, you know, the two of the kids were still in high school, so we would every weekend we would go to a different like suburb outside of Ontario and try to play, and then come home. The boys would go to school. I would go back to my job at the mall, and then we would do it again. But then as that record came out, we started getting more opportunities to go on tour, and we'd go down and tour in America for nothing. And our record wasn't even out down there, but we would go do like 2.5 weeks on the boys' March break and go play, for no one. And
yeah.
But that started to give us that gave us all that road experience, right, when we were pretty young. But the business side of it was still this thing where I was like, okay, wait a minute, we're popular now in Canada, and it seems like we're selling records, but we're not making any money,
Yeah.
And that would continue, and then we made another record, and it got even more popular, and it got even bigger in Canada, and we still weren't making any money. And the guy that had the label was making a lot of money. And that's when we started to kind of really and I don't know, we'd had some other interesting business minded things. Like our first business manager we hired stole a bunch of money from us, and we had a lot of good, bad things happen early, where the person I was seeing behind the curtain a lot, and I was starting to really develop a sense of protection of my own music, and really starting to think about control and how I would love to be in control of this, because I don't feel like this is how I want to be. I don't want to just be another product on somebody's label that's whatever. So we tried to negotiate for our third record, because we were like, I think we've earned it, and he wouldn't do it. But right around that time is when I had made the first City and Color record on my own. Mm-hmm. And my manager, Joel, and I, my two managers, Joel and Trisha, I've known them since I was 15 years old. So in that moment, by the way, you can stop me if I'm talking too much.
This is exactly what this format is for. I love this stuff. Yeah.
So really this is where I think it all changes. Is I make this record. I don't really know what I want to do with it, I made this record because I'd be going on tour with Alexis, and kids would come up to me and say, what are all those solo songs of yours on the internet? Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? And it turns out all these demos I had made when I was sort of playing in coffee shops around in St. Catharines by myself, and I would record solo acoustic songs and burn CDs and sell them for $5. People had put them on the internet. And so sites like LimeWire and things like that had all these songs of mine on there, and kids who got into Alexis were now finding them. Now, again, I have no sense of the internet and technology whatsoever. So this was a shock to me, right? I'd be like, how are you listening to these songs? And then, I found them on LimeWire or whatever. And so I would kind of get home and be like, I think I would if there seems to be an interest in people listening to this side of me.
Yes.
I think I'd like to record some better versions of these songs,
Yeah.
So I went and I made a record with my friend Julius, who had recorded the second Alexis record, would go on to record the second, third, and fourth Alexis records. I went to his studio and recorded a bunch of solo songs. And so, long story long, I had this solo record. I didn't want to give it to the label I was on. And so Joel, he was like, I'm going to start a label. I'll start a label and we'll put it out ourselves, and that way we can control it. And so that in 2005, we started Dine Alone Records to put out the first City and Color record. And again, not ever thinking that it was going to do anything aside from maybe some of these people who were interested in hearing my voice in a different capacity. But then, of course, that first record, like I'd be going on tour with Alexis and I'd come home and Joel would be like, the songs are getting played on the radio, like this is happening. And then before I knew it, it had gone platinum in Canada, but it had done that under our own terms on our own label. And so from that moment, it was like, well, that's it. Like we are doing it this way from now on, you know?
Turns out that if you have something that's very popular, that's making a lot of money, it's a lot better for you to make the money than someone else.
Well, that was the thing, right? Joel and we realized it was like, wow, if you just sort of do it yourself and it works, how different it can be.
But you know what's a trip, man? I hear you talking about that, and it's like, okay, in the year 2023, that probably makes a lot of sense to a lot of the younger listeners to this show, which is like, hey, man, I recorded something, with my Universal Audio interface and I uploaded it to Spotify. It happened to get picked up by a playlist. People liked it. I'm making some dough. And I'm going to start my own label or whatever. 18 years ago, in 2005, it's not like no one had their own label, but it was much less. And also the ability to self-publish like that pre-Spotify. I mean, it was very unheard of. I mean, it was that LimeWire time. I haven't heard that word in like 15 years, and it really kind of took me back.
Yeah.
Because that was a moment in time when people would do kind of like this virtual crate digging to find stuff that was their own and that they loved. I mean, it's cool. It's really neat to think about your music and the genesis of this project that is now globally beloved. It was kind of like this artifact of this hybrid time in the music business.
Yeah, I will always say this. I'm so thankful for those people that started sharing my music online, because they're the ones that sort of, it was like I had a built-in fan base already and I didn't even know about it, who were interested in this other side of me, and I think if I was a bit more savvy with technology, I would have actually figured out how to, understand it a little better as it was happening. But it allowed for us to believe that if we just sort of made this record and kind of presented it out there, the people who were already finding the tunes would find it, and we could figure out how to promote it as best as possible, but not let somebody else take control of it and tell me to go over here, because I was also doing the other band full time. Right. And that was the thing. I was like, I didn't want to not be in that band. I did just have this other side of me. Like, I've always just loved being a songwriter. Like, it's what I've been doing my whole life at this point.
Yeah.
So the word of mouth aspect of my career is something I'll never take for granted, because I think that's exactly how I've built it, is that people hear my music and they tell their friends about it. I've never really had like a huge machine behind it. I've never really wanted that. I don't think I have the personality for that. but yeah, I'm forever grateful for that, the file sharing and how that kind of like gave me a platform to go out and do it.
Well, now 20 years then, or nearly 2 decades of being your own boss in that way with Thine Alone Records, publishing and publishing your own stuff to the world, with no governor of how it's going to go creatively, or you have to do this, or you got to be put in this box. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because now it's all on you, and you're going to kind of live and die by what you'd like to do creatively. What is a practice that you use to stay creatively vital then? Like, how do you continue to find interest in writing songs when there's no apparatus above you to struggle against? I mean, you're the boss, right? So how do you keep it vital for yourself, record to record?
Well, I've always put a lot of pressure on myself, and I don't mean to like succeed and make like a popular record or have like a lot of people. I just always want to see if I can write a better song than I did the day before, and I think because I've literally just been in love with music and writing my own music and getting out of my head, because that's for me, what songwriting has always been, it's been a way for me to just get out of my own way and relieve the tension from what's going on up there all hours of the day. And so I've never needed a push, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've just always remained sort of dedicated to the craft of it and dedicated to the idea of just pushing myself to constantly write and see if I can just be better. And be better, I mean, like, that's just for me. I don't need to be better than somebody or anything. It's just like, can I wake up and use my time wisely?
Sure.
And you know what, too, Joe, I'll say I also feel a very deep responsibility to continue to do it because I know how lucky I am that it worked. And I think there's that part of it too.
You are one of, it's funny, I find that there's this correlation between the artists that are the most successful, like once you hit this certain point where there's a lot of people listening to your music, the ones of them that have come onto this show, that word of like responsibility, it comes up again and again. And again, like there's this crew of people that do it on this certain level. And the universal reaction, it seems like, is to feel not a weight necessarily, but that word responsibility comes up again and again. I find it very interesting.
Yeah, I think you could call it a weight as well, because I don't know if it's the way I started, is like I started in a punk band that was sleeping on people's floors and playing for no one and just been independent my whole life. And so like the fact that it did work out and I did find a career in it and I did find an audience, I think there is this just responsibility, and not only to the people who've been supportive of me, but to all the people who are still trying to make that thing work for them, and to all the people that never got the doors open that I got. And I do think that it's not necessarily the doors opening, it's how you walk through them and how you deal with the opportunities, or like how resilient you can be. Yeah. But I think it's a lot goes into it all working, but I know that luck plays into it, and I know that I'm just grateful and lucky to be doing the thing I wanted to do. And so I think that's where the responsibility of trying to continue to be better than the next, or better than the last song, I think I'll never lose that, Has it been a trip for your parents who bought you that first guitar and your guitar teacher, Randy, to see the whole thing go down? Yeah. And like, I'll tell you, my one teacher in high school, Mrs. Modelow, my English teacher, she's the woman who got me to sing in front of people for the first time in 11th grade. Because I was playing guitar a lot, and all my friends knew I played guitar, but I hadn't started singing in front of people yet. Like I was writing and singing in my bedroom, but it was different, right? I'd taken guitar lessons, so I kind of knew that I could play. Yeah. But singing, I was like singing in my room, and it sounded like I was singing well. Sure. Or like on key or whatever, but I didn't know. And you don't know until you put it in front of people, right? Yeah. My mom would be like, that sounds good. But it's like, yeah, mom's going to say that about anything, right? Yeah, well, of course. So, yeah. But it's like the worst thing in the world is when your mom tells you got a good haircut. You know what I mean? It's like, no one wants to hear that. No. But she heard me singing to myself in the back of the class one day with my headphones on after, like, I'd put a song on and I was about to leave. And she was like, are you singing? Like, are you a singer? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I've been singing a lot at home, and I think, and she was like, you should sing in front of the class. And I was like, no way. Like, and she was like, you're going to sing in front of the class. And she like, a week later, she like rented out the audio visual room and she brought the whole class there, and she was like, you're going to sing 3 songs for us. So prepare them. And I sat and I sang 3 cover songs in front of my class. And like after the class, everybody was like, that's good, Dal. And I just kept going, and then years later, she had retired and she was on a trip with her husband in Italy, and I was there playing, and she came to see me play at this like beautiful 16th century Italian theater in a small town, and it was sold out, and there she was seeing me sing on a stage in Italy like 20 years later. It was really, really beautiful, full circle moment. Thank God for good teachers. Yeah. Dallas Green, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter. We appreciate it. Thanks, man. Nice talking to you.
This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. City and Color's latest album is entitled The Love Still Held Me Near, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.